Good morning, Maria. How are you this morning? I'm glad. I'm feeling pretty safe. I got the sheriff's office in here with me. We've got yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We've got Paul Fournier and Jason Hopkins joining us this morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
And you guys look at two sides, but maybe what you end up doing kind of works together sometimes, sadly, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, we both work together side by side, and most of our cases are connected in some way.
And when I say that, folks, Paul, one of your focus is narcotics, whereas Jason, your focus is child abuse.
Yes.
Yeah. And how are we doing in Tillamook, Paul?
Drugs,
Drugs,
horrible.
horrible.
We're doing horrible in this county. We have a huge increase in heroin and meth use, and of course, the prescription drug problem is still there. Although they have been doing, the prescribers and healthcare have done stuff, had some programs that are trying to reduce the amount of prescriptions.
Not too long ago, there was a lot of talk about overprescription. But the providers or the prescribers are looking at things differently.
Yeah, I know that there's a couple of healthcare providers in the county that are looking at more of a holistic approach to pain management. So including diet and looking at other things other than just giving somebody an opiate
Yeah.
to solve the problem.
Well, what we're looking at with our year of wellness, that so many things, and when Dr. Nedley was here, that if we can encourage people to eat differently, get more exercise, social activity. Do I know that there are times that a pain med is absolutely necessary? I absolutely do. I lost my husband, Jim, in 2000. But hey, the morphine, that one time release one that was so expensive, but it got him by.
Well, and then see, we talked about that
Yeah.
before. Last time I was here, we talked about the fact that these high-powered opiates are designed for that type
Yeah.
of comfort measure near end of life or, advanced stages of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And the history has been to prescribe these to simple, broken arms or undiagnosed back pain, people in their 20s. And I just think that we saw this as a nationwide problem. It still
Yeah.
is. But I think there's the online pharmacies have diminished.
Good.
It's harder to get these pills, but what that has created is a huge market for black tar heroin, which is coming up from Mexico. So right now what we have is the prescription pill problems of the last decade
Right.
have created a bunch of opiate addicts. And now that we're actually smartening up and reducing the amount of opiates that are available to them, as prescribers shut them off, as they should, they are now running towards the illegal heroin, which there is an abundance of, more than enough of. And so we see that in Tillamook as well as it's nationwide.
The dumb person. Where does it come from? How I mean,
It's just here, it's everywhere. I mean, the demand is there, so the supply
the
is going
supply
to
is
fall in.
there.
And one of the things that Jason sees, and we've talked about this, and I've talked about this with other CPS workers, is that there's a direct correlation. If someone's addicted to pain pills or addicted to heroin, they can't really be a very good parent. And so they're not really watching the children, and that's when Jason has to get involved when you have these sexual abuse instances because folks have people in their houses hanging around that they shouldn't, or they're just not really paying attention to their children.
Right. And it also leads in something that's been gaining traction recently has been adult protective services, seniors and people with disabilities, abuse of those people who are more susceptible to abuse as well. Quite often they have their own pain prescriptions and things like that, and oftentimes these people will seek caregiving positions or things like that and take their narcotics from them. So it ties in pretty closely with any type of real abuse, honestly. The drug problem, I think that's why it's illegal. I don't think it's illegal because people don't want you to take them and feel the effects. I think it's more because it affects every level of society and makes people do things they typically wouldn't do.
What can we do? I mean, is there a way that we can help the addict? Is there?
Well, I just spoke at the Tillamook Realtors Association. I spoke at their breakfast, and we talked, and I had a lot of questions about that. There aren't a lot of options in Tillamook County. I would say being aware, so you can and accepting, like you and I spoke about before, is if you have a family member that is you suspect is abusing prescription pills or illegal narcotics, trust your instincts on that. You know, people dismiss what they think they see, and I always say that you should trust your instinct, your woman's intuition, or the hair in the back of your neck or something. And I also tell people what to look for as far as, you know, recognizing that someone is abusing drugs.
What are some of the signs?
Well, the most common way of ingesting, say, heroin or even pills. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're illegally prescribed an oxycodone, there's no legal ramifications on how you ingest it. So what the addict is doing, the person who's taking the oxycodone prescribed for their pain,
They have their pain. They
have
have
their pain pill, they take their
They have the
pain-
bottle that says it was prescribed to them.
right, and it also says how they should take it. Take it
good point,
orally.
good point,
These
okay.
are time-release pills. Now, the addict, the person who is abusing that prescription, is either breaking them down and injecting them, or they're smoking them. And to smoke narcotics such as opiates, prescribed opiates, or heroin, the things you can look for, people will use little squares of tinfoil, and they put the heroin or the pills on there, and they light a flame underneath it and burn it, and then inhale it with a straw or a broken pen. And so I always tell people, you know, if I'm doing a presentation, I always make everybody raise their hand who has a roll of tinfoil half used in their car, and nobody raises their hand. That's a sign. If you have a son or daughter or a family member that has pre-cut squares of tinfoil in their purse, or in the garbage in the house, you see tinfoil rolled up, or, I mean, there is no other,
There's no other.
Or
There's no other
a
logical-
straw that's about 2 inches long and
has a
cut
burnt
at an
residue.
angle and it's kind of melted at one end. That's probably a clue.
there's no other, these are, you know, hypodermic needles if they're not diabetic and they're not using it for anything else. The hygiene will really go by fast. The thing about heroin or opiates is that if the person isn't, if they're at the maintaining stage, which is we talk to a lot of addicts, and one of the things they always tell us is a lot of them are at the point where they're not even getting high anymore, they're just trying not to get sick. Because one of the things, then that's why when you're prescribed opiates, a doctor needs you have to taper your use near the end of the cycle of you using it. Because otherwise, because you're physically dependent, your body's physically dependent on that. Some people go through horrible sicknesses, and that's one of the things that addicts always talk about is they're basically feeding the sickness. So every day they wake up, a heroin addict or a pill addict or an opiate addict has to spend that whole day searching, because otherwise they will get sick, or they fear they'll get sick.
How do they can't go to work? How do they?
Well, that's the thing, is you won't notice a typical heroin addict or an opiate addict. They can, well, trust me, if you work in a building with 20 people, there's somebody in there that's addicted to pain pills. Now, maybe they're not, or abusing pain pills. The thing about opiates is it can be hidden well, because if you don't use it, the signs and symptoms are you're getting sick. But if you're using it but you're not getting high, then you're just maintaining it, then you look normal. If you're abusing it, you'll be on the nod. I've actually dealt with a couple of accidents this year where the person fell asleep behind the wheel while they were on an opiate, and they abused their opiates,
Yeah.
and they went on the nod and crashed their car.
And
And
just
how can you take care of a child when you're on the nod? And that's another
Exactly,
problem. we see a
exactly.
lot of.
And is this something you see, Jason?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the more common calls that we get is you know, suspicion that a parent is using drugs, and like you said, if you're on the nod, or if when you get sick from opiates, you get really sick. Body's just racked with pain, and they say you know
It's strange, because it was supposed to be something that helped you, that can
Well,
do
it does
this
help
to
you till you don't have it in your body. These things are especially pills, are scientifically designed to be very effective.
right.
But there's
But when the
highly
pill
addictive.
is blocking the pain, your body stops making the chemical it uses to block the pain, because it's got something doing it for it. So when you get off, if you just cut off, your body has to start making that again, but it takes a little time, which is why the sickness, why they're in such pain when they do it, which is also something they use to justify it, and people who are associated with them, say, well, I'm helping them by giving them this
here's
stuff. We
the
hear
key.
dealers all the time say that. I'm just helping them from getting sick.
And family
it's not-
members will help out by giving money because they don't want to see their loved one in pain. But here's the thing. You won't die from
withdrawals.
withdrawals from heroin or opiates. You might feel like you want to die. As long as you're watching your hydration level, because you are going to be vomiting and using the restroom a lot. But if you watch your hydration levels and you keep that up, you feel like you're going to die, you're not going to die. You can die from withdrawals of alcohol, but you can't die. It's very unlikely you're going to die, and I have no cases
And you
of that.
can easily die from an overdose of opiates.
And you can easily die from an overdose, and that's the other scare we have now is there is no control of the dosage of heroin. So by the time it comes down here, you don't know what someone's put in there to make it, because when drug dealers down here, a lot of the drug dealers here, they're not the big Scarface. They're not sitting with a pile of dope. They're users that are, we call them hustlers. They're just users that are getting enough of the drug. They'll trip over to Portland. They'll get enough of the drug to come back, to cut some of it, to sell it, just to get there. So they're going every day. This is an
to
everyday
pay for
thing.
their own supply.
So they're cutting it with other substances, and that's the danger too. And also, you never know the potency of the heroin because it's made in a 50-gallon drum in Mexico.
Right.
We're going to take a short break, guys, and then we're going to dwell more on this. But let's see, I've got something from Tillamook Bay Community College. Financing your education can be a major hurdle, which is why Tillamook Bay Community College is dedicated to helping students find alternative ways to pay for college. If you or someone you know is planning to attend TBCC this spring or next fall, it's important to complete a free application for financial student aid, also known as the FAFSA. Completing your FAFSA will allow you to see what type of financial aid you qualify for and can help you plan for school. There's no charge for completing the FAFSA, and completing an application does not require you to accept any loans or grants that you're offered. So it's a safe and secure way to see what type of financial aid you qualify for while you plan for the future. Some students think it's too late to apply for federal financial aid for spring term? Not so. You can still apply for spring. If you're planning to continue your education this fall, it's time to fill out the FAFSA for the 2016-17 school year. Visit the TBCC website, www.tillamookbaycc.edu, to find important links to the FAFSA application and other scholarship and funding information. And if you have any questions, the Financial Aid Department at TBCC is there to help. Give them a call at 842-8222, that's extension 1135, or stop by and visit them at the campus on 3rd Street. We're back visiting with Paul Fournier and Jason Hopkins, and I was going to say that I want some good news, but first I want to hear some more of the bad news, because I don't think.
I don't know if we have.
And they brought their magic wand, and we're all now cured of all responsibility. I think we have a responsibility to our community to be on the lookout to do what we can do. And Paul, if there's any good, what can we do? How can we help?
Well, one of the things, if we're talking about narcotics, is treat any of your prescription narcotics as if they're a loaded weapon. They should be locked up.
Yep.
Medicine cabinet's not locked up. If you have family members or someone working on your home coming into your house, these things should be out of sight
point.
and locked up so that they don't. We have drugs in them. We've had a drug case at the elementary school, at the grade schools now. These kids are getting access. So if the parents have access, used to be the kids who try to sneak the parents alcohol, but now they're getting their pills because they have value. They can sell them at school. Yeah. Or they can use them, so you get to treat them like they're a loaded gun. Lock them up.
One thing, when my Jim passed in, Alice, what a nice woman for the hospice nurse that was there. We don't do this anymore, folks. She took all the pills that were left and she dumped them down the toilet. We don't do that. We don't put those into our system
We have a drop
anymore.
box at the sheriff's office, and that's one thing we would say. If you had someone who was maybe at home on hospice, and they have, because they're giving a lot of fentanyl patches or liquid morphine, those things are desired and expensive and dangerous. And those are the kind of things that when you have, or if you decide you've had an injury or surgery and you
don't need them anymore.
And you don't need them anymore, or you decide you don't want to take them anymore, the proper way to dispose of them is to bring them to the sheriff's office. We have a drop box, like a mailbox, and every day it's emptied, and those get collected, and then those get brought down to the state and they're incinerated. Excellent. In a safe manner so that there's no danger to that. Do not flush them.
We know more now, and you literally do not put them into your wastewater treatment system.
And the thing to remember, I'm going to say this one more thing too, and then people are surprised to hear this, but most listeners will have had something in their life where maybe they were given a pill by somebody, their family member. They have a back pain, and they say, "Hey, I have some left over from my surgery." Technically, that is delivering a controlled substance. If it is a oxycodone or a Percocet or a Vicodin or a Xanax, those are controlled substances. And merely giving one to somebody is technically delivering a controlled substance. And if you are in possession of a pill that you are not prescribed and you cannot prove a prescription of that, you're technically in possession of a controlled substance. Those are both crimes. They're both felonies.
people.
So, I mean, this is one of those things where it's just common.
It's not the same as getting an Advil.
It's not the same, and it's dangerous and it is illegal. I mean, would we come after you for that kind of thing? I'm not saying that that's a focus
Well,
of
and
us.
if it's so
believe us,
bad
but-
that you need something like that, maybe you need to talk to a doctor too.
Well, I think so,
And he's
too.
not, and you're anyway. Just don't exchange.
Those are clues to look for when if neighbors or family members are asking you if you have any pills
Good
left over
thing
from the
about
surgery. That would be something.
Treating them no different than a gun. Don't just leave them in the medicine cabinet.
Right.
Put them out of the way.
Yeah, lock them in a lockbox or something like that, or, and I think a lot of people just don't have that discussion with their doctor when they say, okay, I'm going to prescribe you something for your pain. Well, what exactly are you giving me? Is there some alternative? I don't know how potent this stuff is. Just questions to engage your doctor about your treatment, and maybe you don't really need to take those pills. Maybe physical therapy is an option. Maybe a lighter dose of something
Else
is an option for you. Like a Motrin rather than a morphine.
Yeah, I think,
So.
like I said, we're going to the high-powered stuff, and sometimes you don't need that high-powered stuff, and it does affect the way you feel. I think that the prescribers and the providers in this county are doing a better job of exactly that.
Wonderful.
But people need to remember that when you go to a physician or a doctor, it's your body. You
Yeah.
should be asking the questions. What am I taking? Is this addictive? Is this physically dependent? Am I going to become physically dependent? Is there something else I can
Don't
take?
be afraid because
first?
that's the doctor. Ask the questions because you're
Ask
right.
the
It's your
questions.
body. Good point, Paul.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. When our young people, do we see problems? How young?
Well, typically, I would say high school level is when it starts.
Okay.
I mean, that's typically when they start partying with their friends on the weekends and things like that. There have been, there's people who will take drugs while they're pregnant, and those children come out addicted, and that's a brutal thing to see. There are plenty of documentaries and things out there on that, but it's painful to watch. I mean, the child is born and they're instantly in agony because they're going through withdrawal.
Sure.
But as far as taking it on their own, junior high level students can do it. You typically don't see it really in elementary school. They're just not thinking about those types of things first. But it affects every level. And typically, if you're raised in a drug user home, you're probably going to follow down that same path. I mean, we see it travel down generations of people.
It's the rate is high in Tillamook. I mean, comparatively, it's any rate is high for me, and I
Right.
love this county. But are we worse off than some counties? Worse off than any other rural area? Not necessarily.
I think they're all bad. I think
Yeah.
It's a problem everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any place you could move in the United States that doesn't have some drug problems. I can't say because I haven't seen statistics for specific towns or counties or what have you, but I think part of that reasoning is it's a problem everywhere.
We have
It's
addicts.
pervasive.
We have addicts telling us that Tillamook is just awash with heroin and methamphetamine right now.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for us even to get a handle on it. We're, Jason's technically a narcotics detective who's covering sex abuse cases now. So we kind of do it all as detectives
Yeah.
in our office because we have so many cases to handle. It's hard to even put a handle on how bad it is, but we know it's bad. And that's where the public can help by looking for these signs and symptoms and helping to stop the addict before they get to that point.
And when you sadly have to deal with child abuse cases, sometimes it's just bad parenting. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people can be. I don't want to say a lot, but I guess some people can be ill prepared to be a parent. They just don't know how.
Yeah.
And there's a common misconception with DHS that they're the enemy and they're there solely to take your child away from you, and that's not the case. I mean, the ultimate objective of DHS is to help people become better parents and keep families together. Yeah. They don't want to have to find foster homes for children. I mean, it's a fact that children do better when they're with their families. And in fact, when they do have to place children, one of the first places they look is other family members. But they have all kinds of programs and assistance. If you're having troubles and you're not sure what to do, you stop by the DHS office and ask them, okay, this is what's going on. I need some help with this. They have a ton of different agencies that they work with. We have a bunch of community partners when it comes to child abuse. We have multidisciplinary teams that have meetings for both adult protective services and child protective services. And several agencies will gather up. All the local police agencies will show up, or all the police agencies in the county.
Mm-hmm.
DHS will be there. The district attorney's office will be there. Victims assistance. I mean, there's just numerous people who show up to these, and we roundtable this stuff and new cases that have popped up and how we can best deal with this. The law enforcement aspect of it is entirely different than the DHS aspect of it, but we work well together to figure out what direction to go and what's best for the child or the senior or the person with a disability. That's really the ultimate goal of these teams.
Well, it sounds like when I think about our Women's Resource Center, that working together to find what's best for everyone.
Yeah, they're one of our community partners. We work with them quite often. Also in child welfare cases, they have someone that's specifically assigned to the DHS office who helps those people out.
What he mentioned is one of the things I always, you always hear people are afraid of DHS, CPS, Child Protective Services coming involved. But what he's saying is, parenting, kids don't come with an instruction manual.
Right.
And we have a lot of parents that are either young or they overwhelmed.
Exactly.
They maybe there's not enough money coming in, but they feel overwhelmed. And what Jason's saying is that DHS getting involved after the fact is only one component of what they do. They also provide assistance, financial assistance. They can provide parenting classes. Going in there and saying, "I am overwhelmed. I have no time away from my child. I have no time away from my child. I can't afford daycare. What can I do?" That's the kind of thing that they can help out with. So before you get to the point of abuse, you just can't have enough, and you don't have the coping mechanism. They can teach you how to cope with a child that's cries a lot or doesn't pay attention. I mean, that's what they're not just there to come in to take your children. That's the last thing they want to do. They would love to fix it before we get to that point.
Right. Tillamook Family Counseling Center and DHS, they're far more proactive, and law enforcement tends to be reactive. But those agencies are very proactive, and if someone is having an issue, that's what they're there for. They're not there just to come in and take away your kids.
Yeah, feeling overwhelmed is not a crime. Feeling like you need help is not a crime.
And
I think failing to get the help
what
might lead
could
to
result in a crime, and I think
Yeah.
that's often what happens is that people don't get assistance when they need it, and then it leads to someone snapping. Really.
I've been knowing that our law enforcement is there to help too. I mean, sure, I realize that sometimes it is a reaction. Someone reports something, you show up, but I like the shop with the cop. There's a lot of positive things, so that people remember that you guys are the good guys. That you can call, and that we should be looking for that piece of foil. What do we do? If I see something, I got a kick out of Sergeant Plummer. And I said, so I saw this guy driving. He says, that's a crime, Shane. You call 911 if I see a guy doing something. So there's times when it's immediate crime, you dial 911. But what if you see something and you kind of want to talk to somebody?
You can always just call the sheriff's office and ask to speak to one of us if you want to run something by us. There's also a tip line, which is 503-815-3319. That's the TNT, the Tillamook Narcotics Team tip line. And then Jason has the child abuse.
The
hotline.
DHS child abuse hotline. That's 877-302-0077, and then the Adult Protective Services hotline is 1-800-846-9165.
And Jason, sadly, I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, grandma or something, and she desperately needs those pain meds, and Junior boosted them.
A lot of people haven't been thinking about that, and I think it seems to me very recently that issue has been gaining traction. I just went to the State Attorney General's first conference on adult abuse, and it was pretty enlightening. I mean, they told us that in line with Child Protective Services and sex abuse issues, Adult Protective Services investigations are about 10 years behind the other two, because nobody's really thought about it. But it is a very big problem. I mean, often we get the phone calls about the fraud, the scams. You know, somebody called me up and said this, and
Yeah, we can do a whole show on that sometime.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is. You know, and they specifically target elderly people because they know they have money and they know that they grew up in a different time. You know, when people were more trusting and
And they're also
Good
afraid to
point.
report it.
more worth trust. Yeah, and you know, they don't want to report it because they're embarrassed, or you know, they feel ashamed of what happened. And you know, these things happen, and it's definitely worth reporting. And I think it's something that the state as a whole is is trying to become more aware of and have more of an impact on.
And Jason, that's really interesting because I like to think that we're doing better when it comes to abuse of our children. The children are more likely to say, that's wrong, I shouldn't have to take that. Where years ago, the young person said, well, it was a family friend or an uncle, and they just didn't talk about it. But that now we do talk about it more, but I hadn't thought about elders.
Actually, in both instances, it really kind of depends on what that person or child knows. A lot of it does boil down to education and discussions that the parents have with their children and things like that, because really only 8% of child sex abuse cases are actually reported.
Oh, Jason, that's sad.
And only 8% of those are successfully prosecuted. So,
That's a horrid number.
right, those are really, 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 really bad numbers. And considering the amount of cases that we see, it boggles the mind as to how many there might really be out there. And that's why it's important that parents have those conversations with their children. You know, if
And
anybody,
folks call in and report things that they're suspicious of, especially
Right.
mandatory reporters, but, you know.
We need to help take some responsibility.
Right.
And I think that's what I like that time, Paul, that when you said, if it doesn't look right, it's probably not right.
Right.
We're the best first eye.
Well, you know, the police and all these other agencies, we're just an extension of the community. So we need the community to
This is
step
right.
up as well.
and we are fortunate here. I mean, the people in Tillamook County typically do support their police quite a bit, and
Yep.
you know, with the current atmosphere surrounding law enforcement and the public, it seems a bit. What am I looking for? Confrontational.
Yeah.
But we don't have that much of a problem with it here, and I'm
I like to feel that way.
I feel like I'm fortunate to work as a law enforcement officer in Tillamook County.
Agreed.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for stopping by.
You're welcome.
Let's see. I got a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Andrea Goss. And tomorrow, Bob Larson's going to be here. We're going to be talking about bulls and barrels. That's coming up in March. I think it's March 5th, actually, out at our fairgrounds. Senior meals, noon every weekday at the Kiawanda Community Center in Pacific City. Let's see. Today, between 4 and 8 o'clock, you should have dinner at the Fish Peddler in Bay City to support Neocani Safe. Profits go toward the all-night grad party. Your wait staff for the evening are students from the class of 2016, and they'll have tickets that'll be drawn at the last home game on February 13th for some great raffle prizes. On Sunday, in collaboration with Year of Wellness, there's a community gathering about living and dying from 2 to 5 at the Fairview Grange out on 3rd Street. Pastor Carol Brown on grief counseling, Attorney Taylor Smith-Cattell on wills, estate, and advance directives, interactive roundtable and resource fair with information on caregiving, ALS, and other chronic diseases, networking, technology advances, family issues, and more. And then the celebration begins at 3:30 with great food and music by Buffalo Kitty. Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Tillamook.